I'm not, no, I'm not, we're off mute right now. All right, Mr. Hodges, yeah.
Okay, we are live on YouTube.
Okay, so I think we can get started again for the afternoon session of the November 23rd public hearing of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. We have 3 items to hear this afternoon, and Corey, can you lead us away?
Will do. Thank you, Fred. And as stated, we'll begin with the first of 3 items this afternoon, which is item 4, LPC 22-00294, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 850, Lot 19, 21 East 21st Street in the Ladies Mile Historic District. This is a Queen Anne style row house designed by Bruce Price and built in 1878. And the application is to replace storefront and entrance infill, alter the facade and areaway, and install a barrier-free access lift.
Okay, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. They now have control of the presentation. Jason, you just need to click on your screen, and then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys on your keyboard. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Hello, my name is Jason Boutin with CWB Architects, representing the owners of the building as the architect of records. And I'm here with Andrew Acevedo, a project manager with CWB. Sorry about that. We're just having trouble trying to get to Steve on there. There we go. All right, sorry, we're just trying to get the keys. Okay. The project, as mentioned, is located on 21 East 21st Street, which is in the Ladies Mile Historic District. The site is on the north side of the street between Broadway and Park Avenue South. The building, as mentioned, was designed by Bruce Price, a well-known architect of the 19th century, best known for his shingle style cottages in Tuxedo Park, as well as his work in the Romanesque revival style, including Chateau Frontenac in Quebec City. 21 East 21st Street was built in 1878, allegedly named as the Hotel 21. It consisted of a series of flats with a janitor's apartment in the basement and a servant's quarters on the top floor. In 1904, based on records from the municipal archives, the building was converted into offices, and we found a DOB filing describing the removal of window frames from the basement and first floor and the installation of a show window with a structure consisting of metal angles. The show window can be seen in the 1940s tax photo with a barber shop on the first floor and a drapery shop in the basement. In 1977, there was a major renovation which converted the building back into apartments. And it's possible that the show window was removed at that time. So we have an illustration, we have an illustration which we believe to be a schematic rendering. The design of East 21st includes many elements of the Queen Anne style, including asymmetry with a segmented bay over the main entrance. There's also a nice mixture of textures with the terracotta banding elements and the window headers and the cornice elements, all within a field of Philadelphia brick. And finally, with the elements of ornamentation, this will be seen here in the detail of the bracket under the segmented arch. One item of note that we will be referencing later is the stone banding shown just below the windows of the lower floor. And we believe the present condition, we believe the present condition represents the work conducted in 1977, where the windows were replaced. The base has a new white of brick rising from the basement level up to the sill of the parlor floor windows. The new brick was also added to each side of the existing stoop, possibly to protect from the deteriorating layers underneath. The new brick does not match the proportions of the original Philadelphia brick. No finish was applied to the new masonry, while the historic brick and some of the decorative elements are painted. A maroon color for the field brick and a beige yellow color for the ornamental elements. On this slide, we're showing 3 facades of buildings located in the Ladies Mile district that are of similar scale of masonry construction. They'd also include large show windows in the basement and parlor floor. I'd like to highlight image 3, which is located on 29 West 19th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue. This is a good example of a large storefront incorporated into the masonry facade elements. And this slide, we have the existing and demolition plans. The scope of work we're planning includes the removal of the new white of facing brick on the parlor floor, from the parlor floor sill and stoop and below. This will also include a removal of brick along both sides of the stoop. And we'll show on the elevation drawings, we're not going to disturb any parts of the original brick above the sill, above the parlor floor. The removal of the outer white of new brick is to reestablish the line of the original masonry piers. We will not disturb the structural piers underneath. We will be removing the areaway stair from the sidewalk to the basement, and we will remove the existing metal gate under the stoop. And we will be removing a portion of the sidewalk and excavating to create an enlargement of the current areaway, which will align with the street side edge of the stoop. We have reviewed the areaway with the DOT. The initial feedback is positive, and we have submitted our application, and the drawings are currently under review. We will also be removing the existing stoop railing, which will be refurbished and replaced. And we will also be removing the existing bluestone treads and risers, which have been worn, and prep them for new bluestone risers and treads to match existing. No interior work is planned as part of this application, except the repair needed on the interior side of the front wall. This slide shows the proposed new work. And in here, sorry, our slide's not advancing. There we go. Okay. We will be installing a new cast stone base, which will define the basement masonry bays. These bays will be aligned with the masonry bays in the parlor floor, and we'll describe this work in further detail in our elevations. Install a new steel storefront system for the entry doors and windows. The scope will also include the installation of new exterior stairs from the street down to the basement. These stairs are a manufactured item that will also serve to provide accessibility to the basement level. The stair, when needed, converts into a lift, which we will describe more in an upcoming slide. The work includes new finishes for the enlarged areaway, including new large format bluestone paving, new metal railing around the areaway, new stucco finishes on the walls of the areaway, and stoop to match the new cast stone elements on the facade, as well as some new non-fixed planters. Okay, got it. So on this one, we're showing the elevation of the demolition and construction elevation of both of the building here. On the demolition, we're showing the removal of the windows in the new white brick. The dotted line showing the structural piers that will remain. We're also showing the removal of the existing hollow metal residential entrance door, frame and skylight, and this door is not original. As we move on to the construction elevation, this is probably a good point to describe our overarching goal for this work on this facade. Working with the language of the building's intact, original, and historic conditions, we intend to repair the base portion of this building with new facing elements that reference the historic language of the original building, and then reinterpret some of that language for commercial public use. While this use and fabric was not part of the original design, it is part of the building's history, as well as for many of the structures in the Ladies Mile Historic District. The slides show the detailed elevations of the parlor floor and basement floor. The new windows will be made of a thin profile, thermally broken steel frames and sash with a dark bronze finish. For the main residential entry, we have a single entry door with a high lower style, about 18 inches, flanked by two side lights and a transom above. This design is similar to the condition seen in the 1940s tax photo. We're installing two large single light picture windows on the parlor floor openings. The single light is meant to reflect the show windows prevalent as a historic element in the Ladies Mile district. Beneath these windows, we're introducing a cast stone band that is also installed on the piers below. The stone band is an element that was part of the illustration shown at the beginning of this presentation. The band will start at a similar level shown in the illustration and will be continuous across the facade. It has a chamfer up at the top and will project out about 1 to 2 inches in front of the brick facade above. This helps provide a good transition from the point where the historic brick ends. And it helps reestablish the 2 levels of fenestration that are also visible in the schematic illustration. The band will be recessed within the window bay, where it will also act as a sign band. The recess is to help establish a continuous line of masonry, of the masonry bay all the way from the parlor floor to the basement, which will unite the 2 commercial stories. As mentioned previously, the historic brick has been painted and we will match any repairs to that existing color. At the basement level, we will install an entry door for the commercial space, which will be flanked by 2 side lights similar to the parlor floor entry. And we will have the same high-lower style, about 18 inches. In the adjacent opening, we show a pair of doors with 2 side lights to keep the language of the fenestration pattern consistent on the basement level. This slide shows a larger version of the rendering on the previous page. In this rendering, we're also showing the installation of the new railing around the enlarged areaway. The design of the areaway railing matches the design of the railing of the ADA lift. We felt that the simple rectilinear forms of the railing of that ADA railing were appropriate, as they reflect some of the rectilinear elements of the building's facade elements. And also we wanted to reference the traditional lower height of a traditional yard fence. So the railing is then mounted on a curb with a blue stone cap to achieve the required 42 inches guard height. This is just a rendering showing more of the finishes in the front areaway. And here we're showing our sample board. There's some color samples for the blue stone pavers, the dark bronze finish on the storefront, and the cast stone elements, which will have a natural integral finish that will match the painted finish of the existing decorative stone elements. This slide shows the side elevation of the stoop and the stucco finish to match the stone. And this elevation shows the areaway wall facing the street. The stair and ADA lift are a manufactured item made by FlexStep, shown here in both elevations. The stair converts into a vertical platform lift when the function is needed. It does not require an operator. The operation of the lift is controlled by the user. And this is our last slide, and it shows more details of the lift. We have filed the determination with the DOB for use of this lift. The device has been approved for projects in New York State, but not New York City as of yet. But the unit here consists of a vertical support rails which support the stair and platform. The treads are suspended between the stringer rails and open underneath. When in use, the stairs converge into a level platform, then rises or lowers based upon the button used to call the lift. While in use as a lift, a solid guard that lives in a slot at the top of the stairs raises up to protect the pedestrians at the sidewalk level. Once the user is on the platform, another guard that is attached to the lowest tread rises up and locks in place. Then the platform travels to the intended destination, and after its use as a platform, it converts back into a stair. And this concludes our presentation. We thank you for your time and consideration, and we welcome your questions.
Do commissioners have questions at this point? If so, raise your hand, and I think Lisa will maybe be on the lookout for them as well as I am. I don't see any.
Yes, I don't see any hands. Oh, I do see one hand raised. Wellington.
Yeah, the question regarding to this ADA lift, and if New York City does not allow for its use, is there an alternative?
We do have an alternative. It's a more a traditional vertical platform lift, which we would have to install just a typical stair, which would match basically the elevations. We get back to the one. How do you go back one? Sorry. Oh, shoot. How do you? My bad. Anyway, the stair will then match the existing sort of, match the stairs details that we're showing, and then we'll have to install a vertical lift at a different portion in that areaway.
Okay. And my question would be, can it be painted the same color to match the other railings and so forth?
Yes,
Yeah.
that is, yep.
Okay, interesting. I don't know that we've seen this before.
Yeah, we thought it was a pretty cool little element. And there's, I mean, I didn't want to do it, but if somebody wants to, you can, you can see this thing in motion. The video, there's a point on the last slide where you can click and watch a video, but I didn't want to do it without really controlling.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
If there are no more questions, we'll go to public testimony, which Sasha Seeley will lead us through.
Thank you. All right, so for the first, I will be requesting George Calderaro from Victorian Society, New York, to rejoin as a panelist. George, all you have to do is unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak. I see you're in the meeting.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. George Calderaro, Chair of the Preservation Committee of the Victorian Society in New York. The Victorian Society supports the proposed work at the basement level of this fascinating, very early apartment building by Bruce Price. Removal of the brick cladding and replacement with cast stone will help unify the basement and the upper facade and return it to its historic appearance. The cast stone should match the natural stone of the upper floors, which appears to have been painted. The storefronts at the basement, while a bit discordant, are partly below grade and we feel won't dominate the facade, but their openings appear to extend upwards into the original masonry band separating the basement and parlor floors. The height of these openings should be kept as close as possible to the historic level. Other areaway changes, including the clever stair lift, should provide unobtrusive access to this level. However, the proposed storefront infill at the parlor floor is not appropriate. The window sills at this floor, which have been raised from their original positions, are to be lowered, but we think the proposal lowers them too much. The original sill height should be restored. The single sheets of glass are distracting, calling attention to themselves and destroy the coherence of the building's facade and its residential character. Show windows may be characteristic of the Ladies Mile Historic District, but not of this building or side street. One option is to maintain the existing multi-light configuration at this level for consistency of treatment within the original window openings at the parlor and upper floors. Perhaps a better solution is to replicate the original design of asymmetrical 1/1 double hung sash or single hung sash with a transom as seen in Bruce Price's drawings. The opening next to the entrance would have a single window and on the right side, a pair of windows with a wide mullion. The basement signs, as shown, are well scaled and unobtrusive, but it should be made clear that the similar signs at the parlor floor would not be appropriate to the building's residential character. The fact that there had been an earlier alteration to create a storefront at this level should be irrelevant, as that storefront is long gone. Finally, we're delighted that the fantastic railings will be refurbished and returned to the stoop. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And okay, I will be calling on folks who have signed up first. So just please raise your hand if you would like to speak, if you did not sign up. Next, I'll be calling on Historic District Council. Okay, you should receive a request from me. I see that you are in the meeting. You can go ahead, state your name for the record, please. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Diego Roballo from the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds the design very stylish and commends the architect on their use of materials. We're also in strong support of the proposed flex steps lift and recommend its approval and implementation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next I will be calling on Christabel Goff. Christabel, you should receive a request from me asking you to rejoin the meeting as a panelist. I see you've received it. You are in the meeting. You can go ahead and unmute your mic, please, and state your name for the record, and you can turn on your camera if you wish.
Hello, this is Christabel Goff speaking for the Society for the Architecture of the City. There seems to be a misunderstanding about what this building is, its importance as an early work of the distinguished American architect Bruce Price, and its role in the development of the housing typology in New York, and thus the urgent need for you to modify some transformative alterations sought in this application. Comparables cited in the application, as shown online, are not comparable. This is not modification of a brownstone row house. Not to disparage a building type once the backbone of New York, but there are hundreds, perhaps thousands of surviving brownstone row houses, many much altered, many restored back to original condition. Certainly, in this district, to my knowledge, in Lower Manhattan, there is only one surviving French flats building by Bruce Price in close to original condition, and this is it. In 1878, when it was built, New York was only just beginning to accept the apartment house as a socially respectable dwelling. For some time, so-called French flats, multiple dwellings that were not designed for working class tenements, were seen as a little risque, as Richard Prince explains in The History of Housing in New York City. Writing The Age of Innocence, Edith Wharton, who despised brownstone, which she called, of which the uniform hue coated New York like a cold chocolate sauce. She understood its history of stifling conformity and the new freedom other aesthetic choices conveyed. To demolish the stone structure of the first floor to create enlarged display windows will effectively preclude future restoration, and unmitigated transparency will negate the fine cohesive texture of the facade, the complete ornamented screen built to enclose private life, not display. The house has been through a lot, and removing the non-original brick wall to create a storefront in the basement level is approvable. But the destruction and the failure to restore the first floor facade would negate the purpose of landmark designation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let me see if there are any more hands raised. That's our signups, and I do not see any more hands raised. So I'll hand it over to Lisa Kersavage.
Okay, thank you, Sasha. We sent Community Board 5's resolution to the commissioners, and they recommended denial of this application because of the proposed changes would entail a major transformation of the facade and because of the extensive removal of historic fabric.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions by commissioners at this point? And would the applicant like to respond, I should say first, to anything in the testimony?
The only thing we would like to respond in the testimony is the presentation we presented to CB5. We were originally looking to try to, the original design that we presented them included adding on the storefront back to the facade. And that was what was that was a big part. So a lot of this was not there, and that's a big reason why it was this. I believe it was denied. So that we have gone back since and worked with landmarks and have come up with a solution that is much more about sort of restoring the existing facade. And the last thing I'll say is in terms of destroying the fabric, we're not looking to destroy any of the existing historic fabric that is there. We are leaving all of the masonry openings that are intact. The only area that we are sort of dealing with and repairing and trying to sort of bring back to a sort of more appropriate level are more of the work of the basement floor where it has been basically is nothing but the new brick that was installed in 1977.
Right. Okay. All right. I guess, thank you. I guess at this point we can begin to unmute. If Lisa can do that. And start our conversation. Let's see, I don't know if we left off anywhere, but.
We need a motion to
Fred?
close the hearing.
Oh, I need
Yeah.
a motion to close the hearing. I sure do.
But Fred, before you do that, are there any more questions the commissioners have for the applicant?
I thought I just asked that.
Okay, sorry. All right, so then just close the hearing. Okay.
Okay, so a motion to close the hearing? Uh, Anne, would you make that motion?
So moved.
And Wellington, would you second the motion?
Second.
Okay, so the hearing is now closed, and
We
now
don't get to vote. We have to say all in favor.
Yeah, all in favor.
all in favor. Thank you.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to
Aye.
closing the hearing?
Okay, that's good.
See why Sarah mostly does this? Okay, so now we can start, and I'm looking at John. So why don't you start, John? We'll go around the table.
Well, I guess the first thing I want to say is that, you know, this project, regardless of how we end up, it's all about context, right? You know, this is the Ladies Mile Historic District is different from others. And we would never, ever consider the conversion of the first floor of a building in another district to to commercial in this manner, with this much change. However, we are in this district, and this is a place where we would consider it, and that conversion, I think, is acceptable. The details of it, I'm not so sure. Let's just start with the lift, which, by the way, that lift reminds me of, you know, my son's Transformers. I mean, it's really kind of an amazing, you know, device, and I think it's great. I think it's, you know, I know it's unusual. It looks different from the kind of thing we'd normally, the stairs that we would normally approve, but if it achieves the goal, I think it's a terrific way to do it. I just want to be sure that, of course, if this does not pass muster with DOB, then we're going to see them come back with a specific proposal for a more traditional lift. But at this lift, I'm okay with. I think I'm most concerned. I'm happy with the railings, et cetera. I'm most concerned with the parlor level and the two windows on the parlor level. I think something. There's a couple of things, and I'm not sure I can put my finger on what exactly is wrong, but it seems to me that they eat up too much of the space where the current fenestration is, and that may be because they go down too far at the bottom. It might be because they actually consume part of the brick and in the window openings. But I think that the staff can work with them to get those to be right sized, and I do think that while it doesn't have to go back to the you know, the super hyper multi-light approach that was there before, I know the storefront would require something with a little bit more light and sheets of glass, but I think it does need something to break down the size of those windows. So those are my comments.
Good, thank you. Anne, I think you'll be next.
Audie is usually next, but.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Which do you want, Fred?
Oh, Audie, we'll go with Audie.
Okay.
We haven't been around the table in a while. I forget exactly who sits over there.
All right, no problem. So I actually really appreciate the testimony from Christabel Guff and making a point to help us to understand the kind of the history of the area, but the history of this building. And I've always had you know, she mentioned the Age of Innocence, but I've always had tried to create a picture of where Lily Bart in the House of Mirth lived at the very end, and maybe it was one of these places. But anyway, but that aside, so that would be a really convincing argument for me. That is to preserve the residential history of this building and to restore that moment. But I just can't not look at the 1940 tax image of the building and its show window storefront, the barber above the drapery store. And, you know, without that, I don't think that I would have been able to imagine that there would be another moment, a historic moment to restore. But I kind of think that because it exists, we need to be open to the possibility and the fact that it is in Ladies Mile, meaning that it's a commercial district that's recognized here, that there is room to do this work that they're proposing. And then I'm trying to think, well, then in that case, should they return it to the actual show window, which is a kind of a bay addition to this to the first floor here. And that unfortunately would cover a lot of the details that they here are proposing to restore. And I think that that might be unfortunate. So given that all of those things, I actually can see approving and finding appropriate what's being proposed here. If others feel that there should be a little bit more detail in those kind of oversized, undifferentiated windows, then I'd understand that. But I can sort of see this as a possibility, notwithstanding Christabel's very compelling argument.
Excellent, thank you. Now to Anne.
Okay. I too was persuaded or swayed by Christabel's testimony, and have been spending this time looking back and forth at all the different images. And I think also there's a strange proportion that's being proposed here by bringing the windows all the way down to, I'm not sure what level that is, but it's very close to the floor. And I think that really throws off the whole reading of this parlor floor. So I can agree with a large show window, but I think I would find it to be inappropriate to bring them down as far as they're proposing. I would ask that they leave the existing masonry opening. And in the large window on the right, I think that they should introduce a vertical to break that up because it's a very large window. I think otherwise the basement work is an improvement. And I hope that that stair, that expanding stair lift is approved, because that would be a great product to use in many buildings in the city. So good luck with that.
Great.
For all of us.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Michael Goldblum.
Okay. I love Bruce Price's buildings. He's just such a great, it's like Vermeer, you know, there's so few of them and they're so precious when you find one. They're really neat. So I too share a desire with everyone else to find a way to make this work. And I too share I think a flexibility about not insisting on a purely restorational approach, but my compromise would be a little bit different. I think dropping the sill is okay, but what I would suggest is restoring the transom. If you look at the original historic images, it was an asymmetrical double hung where the top light was about at 6 feet off the ground. And if you were to restore or recall that proportion, you would still have a perfectly adequate store window that you could show stuff in, and you would recall the proportions of the original in a more effective way. So I would suggest that they look at doing something that recalled the asymmetrical double hung arrangement with the multi-light or decorative top sash. And I would also suggest that they design the railing to be more recalling of the original. The original is such a distinctive element. I would suggest that they either try to replicate it or recall it. And lastly, I would say that they should go to the DOB and say that the Landmarks Preservation Commission demands that this lift be approved.
Okay, see where that'll get you.
Exactly, that and a nickel.
Right. Are these things, Michael, that you think can be done with staff? Or would you? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now,
if I could just make one point while the discussion continues. Commissioner Goldblum was referencing the historic etching with the asymmetrical windows. And in that same etching at that parlor floor window, the wider of the two, it does show the wider division, mullion, and that's also implied in what remains of the recessed infill under that keystone that you can see in this image here. So right. I think the commissioner should perhaps discuss if they do want to see those things in tandem, since they were both there at the same time.
Look, I mean, I think it'd be great if they put the center mullion back. With the post, it was actually not a mullion, it was a decorative post, but I'd be okay if they didn't. I think it's really the proportions and kind of setting a template for what would happen up above. The windows up above are clearly replacement windows. There will come a time when they're going to be replaced again. And I think that it would be a big win for the building to be able to restore the asymmetrical double hungs up above. And I mean, it's kind of, there was a building in Harlem that we saw that had a similar fenestration pattern a few months ago. And I thought that, I really think it's the asymmetrical double hung with the decorative transom that is more, or the decorative upper light that's more important than the pier. And I think the pier would be hard to support from a storefront perspective.
Okay. Michael Devonshire.
I am on the side of having the windows be in the original masonry openings, and I would like to see a divider in the larger of the two windows, be it a post or a mullion.
So does that place you pretty much with Michael Goldblum?
Yeah.
He's more conservative.
No, actually, he doesn't want a mullion or a post in the larger of the two.
What's happening here is everybody's tinkering with it in a slightly different way, and I'm trying to see how we can.
Well, we're doing that to try and confuse you, Fred, to see where to go.
It's working. It's working perfectly. So let's see how Wellington can continue.
I agree with Michael's comments about the railing, however, and I do think I'm ready to pick it outside of DOB for that new building.
Okay. All right, Wellington.
So Fred, just not to confuse you, I think if I may sum it up, I think there's consensus that we would love for DOB to approve this ADH item. I think we're in agreement there. I think there's a sense movement toward having the guide rail or the guardrail to be more in context and the character of the original design. I think there's no disagreement there. I don't think there's a disagreement about going the original fitting of the opening, and I think the transom should be there. I think the part A and part B seems to be whether the commissions want to go with a center vertical element, whether that be a post, or leave it as Michael Goldblum suggested. So I leave it to the majority on that one.
Well, I'm not sure there's going to be a majority, but we'll find out. Okay, well, from my point of view, I also was persuaded by Christabel Goff that a Bruce Price early residential building like this is a very different animal than the brownstones that we see so many of, and Edith Wharton apparently hated. And those brownstones have been changed in many different districts, not just this one, to acknowledge a commercial overlay. Certainly Montague Street in Brooklyn Heights is a great example of that. But this is different. This is different, as Christabel pointed out, and thank you for that, Christabel. And I think, therefore, something a little bit more aligned with the original maybe should be brought forth in a revised design here. I do think the railings can be, as has been suggested, a little more accurately detailed. And we all hope that this cool stair works, because maybe it'll work in other places as well. That being said, I think we should try to craft this, and I'm not going to do what Sarah does so brilliantly, which is try to do it myself, because I don't have the paper here to do it. But if we could ask Michael Goldblum maybe to read the read the statement. Michael, could you do that? And then
I can. Do you think we'll have enough? So am
Well,
I
think-
just let's talk about the windows. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the only thing that
Yeah,
I'm
it's
not
only
clear
about the
on.
windows. So I was hoping you could craft something that might get 6
Well,
months.
I can, but the question, I mean, Anne was saying leave the sill up. I was saying put the transom in, but don't put the divider in. Michael was saying put the divider and the transoms in. Adi was saying leave it as is. And so
That's what I was acknowledging earlier. Now, we can bring it back too. You know, we can ask them to think about this and bring it back for this one item. I was just trying to avoid that.
Well, I guess the question is, would would Anne accept the sill dropped? Yes or no? And the answer is no. So the sill has to stay up. So I think I would say, give it back to them and say, you've heard what you've heard, make your shot.
Okay, I'm happy to do that. And I'm happy to do it particularly because it's Bruce Price. A real
Worth it, yes.
fan of him, and we have so few of them too. All right, so I think you've garnered a lot of support for much of what you're asking for here, almost everything, as a matter of fact. But maybe try to interpret working with our staff, if they can help you there, craft a new design that will get support from at least 6 of us when you bring it back, and we can hear it as soon as you're ready, which might be pretty soon because it's not a lot of work to do. I guess so. With that, we'll move on to the next item.
Okay, and that is public hearing item number 5, LPC 22-02942, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 1493, Lot 107, 7 East 81st Street in the Metropolitan Museum Historic District. This is a row house designed by Griffith Thomas, built in 1878 to 79. The application is to redesign and reclad the facade and replace ironwork.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Just click on your screen, and then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Okay, thank you, Abby. Good afternoon, commissioners. My name is Sarah Scher. I'm from Higgins Quays Barth Partners, and we are the historic preservation consultants for the 7 East 81st Street project. I'm joined today by my colleague Kat Stackelberg, owner and architectural designer Katerina Heil, as well as Pierre Taruz from Studio Cass. So 7 East 81st Street is located on the north side of East 81st Street between Madison Avenue and 5th Avenues within the Metropolitan Museum Historic District. The proposal before you this afternoon is for the recladding and redesigning of a heavily modified stuccoed facade in limestone to better relate to its former row and the overall historic district. I will note before the presentation begins that this building does have a facade easement with the Trust for Architectural Easements, and they've issued a letter in support of this proposal. Okay, so 7 East 81st Street was originally constructed in 1878 as a row of 10 brownstone houses. These were built speculatively for Richard Arnold and Henrietta Constable and designed by architect Griffith Thomas. On the left side, you'll see a 1911 photograph here. Our building is below this red arrow here. And by this time, 2 of the houses of the row to the left of the building, this one and this one, have already been refaced with limestone, and the remaining row exists to the right. In the 1940 tax photo, we can see our building in more detail right here. At this point, its neighbors to the east have also been refaced, and the westernmost building has been demolished to serve a new apartment building at the 5th Avenue corner. You'll notice in this photo and all of our other photos that the windows are slightly off-center. This was because the building was designed to be viewed within the row, which would have balanced out the masonry on either side of the window openings. We can see the original building had a stoop, a rusticated base, a balustrade in front of its parlor level window, pedimented lintels, projecting window enframements, and a sheet metal cornice. By the time of Landmark's designation, here's the designation photo from 1977, the building has been substantially altered. The stoop has been removed, all of the detailing around the windows has been stripped, the windows have been replaced, the brownstone has been stuccoed and painted over. Additionally, through-wall grills have been added at the front facade or underneath this bay of windows. The only remaining intact historic fabric at this point is the sheet metal cornice at the top of the building. The result is a heavily modified facade that's part of a row of buildings that have all been either reclad or rebuilt at some point through their history. As we'll discuss in this presentation, the construction of the Metropolitan Museum had a tremendous impact on the residential development and design within this area of the Upper East Side. As the Met evolved with its various additions, so too did the row houses. We feel that given the altered condition and lack of integrity at 7 East 81st Street and how much its context has changed since its original construction, that there's an opportunity to enhance its facade and provide a new design that's appropriate for the historic district. Okay. So speaking of the Met, here we have some historic images showing its development. The museum opened in 1880 with a Russkian Gothic structure and dark brick designed by Calvert Vaux and Jacob Remold, as we see on the top left. By 1888, as we see on the top right, we see the museum was expanded with a red brick structure with a stone base, stone trim, and slate roofs. This was designed by Theodore Weston and Arthur Tuckerman. And then bottom left, in 1902, Richard Morris Hunt takes on an expansion and major identity change to the Met Museum. A large limestone addition is placed in front of the brick structure before it, making a statement towards Fifth Avenue. It's at this time that we see a lot of the neighborhood changing too, from darker masonry buildings to light limestone buildings, often with Beaux-Art or neoclassical designs. In the 19-teens, McKim and White also added on to the Hunt design to the north and to the south, completely blocking the older structures behind. So at the time when the first wing of the Met was being constructed, much of the neighborhood was being developed with speculative brownstone row houses. This slide is to show that there are still extant examples of intact brownstones within the district that represent this period of development. Soon after the construction of the Richard Morris Hunt limestone addition to the Met, building owners in the area started to make changes to their buildings in order to better blend in with this aesthetic. Some simply painted their buildings with other minor modifications to better relate to limestone. Some buildings were more stripped of detail to give them a more modern look. And then the third category is that some received entirely new facades. All four of these buildings on this slide were originally constructed as brownstones and then were refaced between 1907 and 1919. Their window locations and openings changed, they received new details, and they were all given limestone fronts. So while our building has both been stripped of detail and painted to look more like limestone, it has lost its character as both a former brownstone house and is also not intentionally redesigned to be something else. A probe at the ground floor revealed that the brownstone easily fell apart with the touch of a hand, and likely the existing louvers and stucco at the upper floors have led to brownstone deterioration as well. At the ground floor, we do have some simple historic areaway fencing that you can see here, and a newel post that no longer connects to the stoop. We believe the stoop was removed in 1946. There's also a large non-historic planter that's dividing the areaway. So given the lack of identity, character, and original context at 7 East 81st Street, we feel there's an opportunity to continue the spirit of the new facade as a change in identity to enhance and relate to the historic district. Our building is also less than a half a block away from the Met Museum. And as you look down East 81st Street from Madison Avenue, the presence of the Met is right there. We feel that a proper limestone redesign to this front facade will enhance the gateway to this important landmark. So here is the original 10 buildings of the brownstone row as they exist today. Here's our building right here. As I mentioned, all of the row has either been reclad or rebuilt. Our building's original context is lost, and in its place is a context of light masonry buildings that are of a higher style design. And here's a photograph of the existing block as well, showing that all of the original brownstone buildings have been redesigned with limestone or a light colored brick. Okay, so here we have existing on the left, proposed on the right. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the existing windows are positioned slightly to the left because they were intended to relate to an overall row that is no longer extant. With the new design, we are proposing to relocate the windows to a symmetrical position on the facade. It was very important to the project team to maintain the extant sheet metal cornice at the top of the building, as it is the only fully intact historic fabric left on the facade. With a new limestone facade below, we're proposing to paint the sheet metal cornice a limestone color to blend in with the facade, which would be typical on a limestone fronted row house. Below, we are proposing new 4-inch thick ashlar limestone cladding with a limestone rusticated base. The top 3 floors are proposed to have matching limestone window enfraiments to reference other enfraiments in the district, as well as 4/4 true divided light wood windows to match examples in the district. At the piano nobile level, we're showing wood casement windows with a limestone bracketed lintel to reference examples in the district. At the base, new wood doors utilizing the existing openings are proposed here and here, and then new areaway ironwork to reference other examples in the district. And here's an elevation just cut through the areaway so that you're seeing the full base. And here's a rendered elevation showing the effect with the limestone, with the painted cornice, and then the limestone cladding below. So as I mentioned, the project team drew inspiration from the historic district. 2 buildings that were particularly important were 21 and 23 East 81st Street, which you see on the left. These were part of the original brownstone row, but were rebuilt. But as a result, they had the same width as 7 East 81st Street and helped us with proportions for the recladding. As you will see, a lot of inspiration comes from the window enfraiments here, and then the casement windows at the piano nobile level here. So here we're showing the thinking behind all of the design elements. At the top and the bottom of the building, the design team is utilizing existing features, including the intact historic cornice, the rusticated base, and the existing door openings. As I mentioned, the window enfraiments are inspired by 21 East 81st Street in a row, and 4/4 windows are seen within the district, with one example being at 26 East 82nd Street. Balustrades between the ground floor and the piano nobile levels are common on limestone fronted buildings. We also see a balustrade in front of the historic parlor level windows in the earlier historic photo of our building. So here's a detail of the window enfraiments and 4/4 wood true divided light windows at the upper floors. These will be double hung in operation and have appropriate muntin and brick molds detailing. We'll be working with wood window manufacturers to finalize these details. And here are details at the piano nobile level. Dimensional limestone balusters in front of a wood casement window. Once again, window details are still being finalized. A simple bracketed lintel is on top. And here's a wall section showing we're proposing to keep the backup 3 widths of brick and recladding with 4-inch Indiana limestone cladding. So putting all these pieces together, here again is the proposed elevation on the right and proposed rendered elevation on the left. And then just going to the areaway, as in, we'll be removing that non-historic planter that's dividing it in the middle. There'll be a new fence and gates around the exterior of the areaway, and the new doors will go within the existing openings at the base of the building. And here is an existing and proposed elevation showing the new doors. And then an existing and proposed areaway fence. As I mentioned, there's an existing newel post that no longer connects to the stoop and hasn't done so since 1946. The rest of the fencing is very simple in design. And here are some photos of fencing within the historic district that are being used for inspiration for the design of the new areaway fence. A materials palette, including Indiana limestone, windows to be painted to blend in with limestone as would be typical for this building type, black iron for the new areaway fencing, and painted green wood doors for the new entrances. And then here is the new design in its context of the original 10 row. We feel it fits much more comfortably in what was its original row, with a design facade that has more depth and is a true masonry fronted building. And here's a photo rendering within the block. And then just to summarize on this page with an existing photo on the right and a rendering on the left. So the Metropolitan Museum and its surrounding residential buildings represent a significant switch in tastes at the turn of the 20th century. This particular district adapted to the change in architectural interest by making well thought out design modifications to front facades of speculatively developed brownstones, often using limestone cladding. 7 East 81st Street does not belong to its earlier brownstone era or that period of front facade redesign that is so characteristic of this particular district. We feel that given the altered character of 7 East 81st Street, there's an opportunity to enhance this row and this block with the designed facade clad in limestone that derives its details from its context. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there questions? And Lisa, can you help me see a hand raised if I don't see them?
Yes, absolutely. I don't see any commissioner hands raised for questions.
All right. Well, I have a question, which is, you first described the railing along the sidewalk as historic, and then you described it as gone. And is that original to the original brownstone, or was it part of a later layering of the history of this place?
Yeah, the railing, the fencing is original to the brownstone, but is quite simple in its design. The newel post is a remnant of the stoop. So it was intended to serve the stoop. There were 2 of them, but there's just 1 remaining.
Right.
And that's a bit more designed, but it no longer serves its original function as a newel post on a stoop.
Understood. Thank you. If there are no more questions, I can turn to Sasha Seeley now to entertain individual testimony.
Thank you. Okay, so please raise your hand if you would like to speak. First, I'm going to call on those who signed up first. So I'm starting with Friends of the Upper East Side. You should receive a request from me to rejoin as a panelist. I see you have accepted the request, so please just unmute your mic, turn on your camera if you wish, and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, this is Laura Variali, representing Friends of the Upper East Side Historic Districts. Honorable Commissioners, Friends Preservation Committee usually takes issue with applications such as this that propose to recreate an architectural style that has never been part of the building's history. Out of the original 10 row houses designed by architect Griffith Thomas, only 4 remain, and 7 East 81st Street is described in the Historic District designation as the only one of the row not to have been extensively remodeled, and is the one that best illustrates the early appearance of the houses. We do recognize, however, the lack of uniformity and harmony left on this block, the significant alterations on this building that have removed historic details, and the existing conditions of the structure. 7 East 81st was designed to be perceived as part of a much larger row, and the current proposal, albeit not to restore the original Italian characteristics, is not extravagant and does not call undue attention to itself. We commend the architect for having created a design that blends original Italian details, such as the existing historic cornice and the balustrade at the parlor floor, with new Beaux-Arts details that bring together elements of other buildings of the historic district. Friends appreciates the shift of the openings to introduce symmetry and the incorporation of the historic cornice into the new design. Furthermore, we do not think the introduction of limestone would detract from the building style. Nevertheless, the proposed 4/4 windows seem out of scale, and we believe more divisions will provide better harmony with the design and other buildings on this block, all sporting 6/6, 8/8, or 12/12 windows. Additionally, we cannot support the removal of the historic newel post and ask the applicant to reconsider the front design to to incorporate the ironwork, as it is one of the very few significant elements of original historic fabric that remains. Finally, while not original to the construction of the row house, the tripartite entrance door is shown in 1940s photos, and its design enhances the building's character and should be restored. While we recognize the aesthetic improvement of this application, we ask the architect and owner to work with the commission to fine-tune the proposal and come up with an improved design that celebrates this building's history. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, for my next sign up, I have Historic District Council. You are now rejoining as a panelist. I see that you are in the meeting, so all you have to do is unmute your mic, turn on your camera if you wish, state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Diego Roballo from the Historic Districts Council. While HDC finds the preservation of the facade to be an acceptable notion, we take issue with the clear lack of attention given to the design of the ground and parlor floors, as compared to what was given to the upper levels. There is a rigid symmetry on the upper floors that is not reflected on the ground floor. Perhaps recalling the flat arches on the parlor floors would help to mend the composition. There is also nothing in the proposal to manage the transition between the two lowest floors, prominently seen in the obtrusive parlor level Juliet balconies, which are oversized and unsuccessful. If the balcony railing extended across the whole parlor floor, it would allow for more developed work to be done on the unresolved ground level facade below. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, my next sign up, I'll be calling on George Calderaro. George, you should be receiving a request from me. Okay, I see that you are in the meeting. You can just turn on your mic, state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. George Calderaro for the Victorian Society, New York. When we reviewed this proposal, we had no problem with the idea of redesigning and recladding the facade and replacing the ironwork. The Upper East Side Historic District and its neighbors, the Metropolitan Museum and Carnegie Hill districts, each has a long tradition of substantial facade alterations. In many districts, we'd be urging the applicant to replicate the historic facade shown in the excellent text photo, but here they have choices. However, we do not believe the actual design they are proposing is appropriate on two levels. The bigger problem is that they're not displaying the courage of their convictions. Instead of creating a strong, unified design based on a specific historic model, they've shopped the neighborhood, creating a bland pastiche where the elements aren't as strong as the historic cornice to remain, or the varied and exciting facades of their immediate neighbors, or the superb McKim Mead & White building 998 Fifth Avenue at the corner of 5th and 81st Street. If they don't want to replicate the strong details of the original brownstone facade, they need to create a gutsier new design. The problem is that on a formal level, the proposed fenestration pattern and details are fighting the overall concept of the building. The existing western entrance is centered beneath the parlor floor on the west side of the facade. The proposed western entrance has an inexplicably shifted off center of the window, diminishing the overall formality of the design. In the photos of other row houses which the applicant has provided, there is often a main entrance which is more elaborately detailed than the secondary entrance. The proposed design doesn't take advantage of this tradition, but restricts itself to, quote, normal and normal times 2. Many row houses in the neighborhood use large, handsome light fixtures to add variety and character to the building and streetscape. There are no light fixtures shown here. Many include bold ironwork that adds to the presence of the building and marks the main entrance. The proposed ironwork does neither. And many houses vary the size of the window openings, adding variety. Their neighbor at 9 East 81st Street has French doors with transoms at the parlor floor, 12 over 12 windows at the second and third floors and 8/8 windows on the fourth. We urge the applicant to either restore the original facade or prepare and present a stronger, more unified design based on a specific historic model. Thank you and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Okay, let me see. I don't see any more hands raised, so there is no one else who wishes to speak. I will hand it back over to Lisa Kersavage.
Okay, thank you, Sasha. So in terms of additional testimony that was submitted, we received something from Community Board 8, who found that the proposed design is appropriate to the district and recommended approval of the application as presented.
Okay. Thank you. Would the applicant like to respond to testimony? There's several aspects.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that was great testimony, and I think it touched on a lot of the issues that we were wrestling with when we were looking at how to treat the front facade. I think, you know, specifically to the Victorian Society, I think the challenge with this building was that the historic cornice is extant and is in good condition and is an important part of this building. So we were really trying to look at a way to create a new front facade that related to that cornice, but also sort of was transitional to something that better coexisted with our row and with the historic district. So Katerina and her team really put a lot of thought into details that could straddle the Italianate cornice and the more neoclassical designs that we're seeing on our block. For HGC, you know, we wanted to work with what we had as much as possible in terms of window openings and the details from the block and our historic photos. And if there's issues that with proportions that the commissioners also feel are proportional issues, we're happy to work with staff on that. For Friends, I understand that the fence and that newel post are historic, but I do feel that the newel post has lost its companion, its other newel post, and it no longer serves a stoop, and that the other fencing is very simple in design. In terms of the tripartite door, that is a door that was added in 1939 for a doctor's office. We did not feel that it was significant in its design or special, so that is why we're proposing to replace it with 2 wood doors. I think that's.
I think you've covered it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Commissioners, any further questions? If not, I'll ask Walling to move that the hearing be closed.
So moved.
Michael Devonshire to second that.
Second.
Okay, the hearing is closed and now
We
we'll.
have to vote. We have to vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposing closing the hearing? Okay, the hearing is now closed.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Addie, would you like to start? Is she here?
Yes,
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
I actually think that this is a really kind of staid and quiet and beautiful proposal. And I think that the unusual aspect of it is the width of the kind of the size of the windows. And they feel slightly bigger than you would otherwise think, and even than the original. They just have a bigger proportion about them or sense of them. And I've always been struck by the building down the way. I think I would imagine it's 1 East 81st Street. And a couple of those buildings, the one on 83rd Street as well, and the kind of the slightly bigger than normal windows, very slightly, but they register that way. And I think I just think it's really interesting to see it on this very narrow facade, and with these 2 bays of windows, kind of very formally centered, despite the ground floor openings being slightly outside of that limit. But I just think it's really successful, and I think it's appropriate and support it.
Thank you. Anne?
Okay, I can support the refacing of the building in limestone. I think it's, I'm in agreement with testimony that the proportions are a little odd. I see what Adi's saying about how sort of calm it is, but it seems a little bit maybe too calm. And maybe they can work with staff to help refine some of those details. Looking at the enlarged section, it seems like some things are not quite fully realized yet. And maybe there's something to be done with the balustrade at the parlor level to help unify those door openings below, maybe like having it go right across or something. But I think it could use a little bit of refinement, but otherwise I think it's an appropriate change to the building.
And you think that refinement can be achieved by working with staff?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Michael Govlo.
All right, thanks. I agree with Ann. I think that it needs a little bit of work with the staff. My view of it is that it's kind of not a Beaux-Arts or neoclassical design. It's really a limestoned up version of the original Victorian Italianate. That's why the proportions are weird. That's why the top three windows are basically identical. If you look at the buildings that they showed as precedents, the Beaux-Arts or Georgian buildings, they have a base middle top that's much more clearly defined, usually with a belt course at the top floor or a diminution of the detailing at the top floor or something else going on that would kind of allow for the building to rise in a more classically balanced way. This purposely doesn't do that. It rather goes back to the original design, the brownstone design, where you have a base and a piano nobile, and then it's all pretty much the same. And I actually think that's a good thing. But I would suggest that in line with what Ann was suggesting, that they look with the staff to the original building for their inspiration. Specifically, I think that if they could consider putting the pediments back over the piano nobile windows. Ann was talking about messing with the balustrades. I think if you extended the belt course between the balustrades and to the end, again, that replicates the original. So I think that to the extent that you're focused on a limestone version of the original, I think that's an appropriate approach to the recreation of a new facade here. I would just suggest that when they do work with staff, if they are keeping the cornice as the kind of starting place of their design, you got to watch out, because that cornice is now attached to the stucco. And if you're going to be putting a limestone facade on it, now you're going to have a 4-inch or 3-inch facade projecting forward of that cornice. So that probably means you want to rehang the cornice so that it's in front of the limestone and it has the same relationship to the stone as it did in the old days. And lastly, I do echo George's comments about the entry being, there's two kinds of ripped off brownstone entries. One where they're kind of embarrassed and they did it on a budget, and one where they kind of tried to own it. And I think that they should go for version 2 and not version 1.
Okay, thank you. Good catch with the cornice idea. Michael Devonshire.
Thanks, Fred. I'm afraid I'm going to be the odd man out on this one. There's been much said about the soul of this building and how do we relate an Italianate cornice to a Beaux-Arts facade. In my estimation, what we have here is fundamentally a brownstone building. And so if you want to approach this properly, you replace it in brownstone. You don't reclad it in a completely different stone that has nothing to do with the original building. And so as far as I'm concerned, this should be returned to a brownstone facade. If you can tack on a limestone or a cast stone hood on a limestone facade that's been tacked onto the building, you can put back a brownstone or a cast brownstone hood on a building. And so as far as I'm concerned, this application is not historic preservation and I can't accept it.
Okay, thank you. Wellington.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think Commissioner Devonshire pointed out something interesting, which is the fragile nature of the brownstone, and Commissioner Goldblum's good catch on the corners about the limestone going vertically up. I personally don't have a problem with the limestone. I do agree with the rest of the commissioners about there's something odd that we cannot pick a finger on is the size and the proportion of those fenestrations. And I think that because the original facade is sort of asymmetrical, is off-centered, whether one of the testimony suggestion may be a good one, which is the size and the proportion of the two windows, whether they should be identical and symmetrical, and plus along with some of the excellent suggestions from Anne and Michael Goldblum. So I'll leave the majority to decide what's the appropriate, but working with the staff, I think.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson.
Again, I'm surprised by the sequence every single time. I never learn. I'm actually with Commissioner Devonshire on this one. I guess he summarized it with it. It's not restoration. So I'm with him on this.
Okay, I think that leaves me, and I could support it, although I'm persuaded much by Commissioner Devonshire's observations. It does seem interesting that the cornice would be the only thing that's really retained, and then the entire front is now kind of built on that idea. But there's such a huge variety of revising details and wholesale facades of these row houses, particularly in this district, that I can sort of accept this as an amalgam of many different things. Frankly, it doesn't call attention to itself, which I think is a good thing. So I could support it, but I don't think we're going to now have 6 votes for it. I only count 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2 against it. So I'm afraid that we can't go forward at this point. I think I would ask the applicant to work with the staff to think about this, and we could bring it back, of course, in this or some slightly altered form, or perhaps a whole new form. But we will have more commissioners in the future, presumably, to vote on it. We only have 7 today. So I think that's where we are. So we'll just have to ask you to work with Corey and his staff to figure out kind of how to move forward. And we'll go to the next and last application for today.
All right,
Okay.
thank you very much.
All right, we'll finish up with item number 6. That's LPC 22-02394, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 2090, Lot 9, 253 Carlton Avenue in the Fort Greene Historic District. This is a simplified Italianate style row house built in 1860, and the application is to construct a rear yard addition.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Just click on your screen, and then you can advance the slides with your arrow keys on your keyboard. Just unmute yourself, state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Hi, this is Jim Hill from Urban Pioneering Architecture. I assume you can all hear me just fine at this point and see the screen. Here to present 253 Carlton Ave, a removal of an existing rear extension and reconstruction thereof. So let me dive right in. There we go. And change my screen a little bit. There we go. So you can see the existing front facade and the location within the historic district. The work that we're proposing does not affect the front facade. As an aside, there are some violations, landmarks violations related to work performed without a permit, all of which relate to the front facade. We are pursuing another application. The owners have money in escrow as coordinated with the staffer and Lily from enforcement. So those issues will be handled as a separate application. Regarding the work, let's try this again. There we go. There's the front facade in the middle in context with the others. You can see the neighbor on the right, which is the south, is a very similar building, both of which are smaller than the surrounding neighbors. And here goes the existing rear facade. This is kind of a agglomeration of two separately built, but adjoining same structures, cinder block for part of it and frame for another part. And you can see our proposed back here. And the existing one is 1 story, extends out about 19'2" from the rear of our building. The adjacent building on one side is a little bit deeper than ours. The adjacent building on the other has kind of an L with a side outer court. The proposed, we are replacing the existing 1 story with a new of the same size, same 19'2". The second story of the addition aligns with the adjacent building to the north. It's only 8 feet deep. One of the main criteria for approving rear extensions, particularly at staff level, is whether or not the block in question has 50% of the buildings of which have extensions. You can see the block itself doesn't, but down at our end, at the south end, we are at just about at 50% of different heights similar to ours. Pictures of going from north to south of the different extensions. This one, 244 Adelphi, is the approved by Landmark's proposal for an addition to, you can see the photo of the existing here. That one has 2 stories at a deep extension, a 3rd story at a shallower extension, and then the top is unchanged. So similar in size and articulation, I should say, but 1 story greater in size than ours.
Can you point out where that is?
Oh, sorry. Absolutely. See if I can zoom in. Oops, sorry.
Just put your cursor on it.
Yep. Give me a second for the software to catch up again.
Okay.
It's the one right in the number 5, 244, the line drawing.
Yeah, but where is it on?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's this one right here. You can see that one.
Yep. Okay.
And then we are here, so it's pretty catty corner, very close context.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome. Again, so you can see the articulation of ours is similar to that one. The existing again on the left, proposed on the right. The ground floor extension, that again, that matches the existing depth of the existing extension. And the second floor, which aligns with the adjacent building to the right, in this case to the north. The top row of windows is largely unchanged in that the masonry openings stay exactly the same. The only difference is this one, the sill gets lowered so we can have a door. Masonry opening width stays exactly the same. The proposed exterior cladding here is white stucco, and the doors will be black anodized aluminum, steel and glass doors. The existing section, I'll quickly go through the extended, but you can see the adjacent building again to the north. And then the proposed. So again, to flip back, you can see the proposed comes out to exactly the same size as the existing and comes out to the adjacent building. You can see them side by side here. And the plans, and crawl space underneath so that we're minimizing disturbance to foundations. We don't expect any underpinning of the existing neighbor to the north, and the existing neighbor to the south, again, is far enough away. We don't expect to disturb them at all. Let's page through just real quick. Simple, straightforward bedrooms and such on the first floor. Living, kitchen, dining with the roof terrace on the setback on the second floor. Bedrooms and roof terrace on the third floor. I'll go back to the rear elevation, and that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from any other commissioner? Raise your hand. No, I'm not seeing any. Lisa,
Not
do you?
seeing any either. Yeah.
Okay. Well, at this point, I can turn it over to.
Oh, I'm sorry. We
That's
do
all right.
have one from Commissioner Devonshire.
Okay.
Sorry. Why white stucco?
I think other than just kind of to kind of keep a clean aesthetic, I just differentiate between the extension and the main house. Seemed an appropriate choice here.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we can go now to Sasha Seeley, who'll lead us in the public testimony.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so please just raise your hand if you signed up to speak or if you would like to speak. I will call on those who signed up first. So first I will start with Historic District Council. I see that you are now the meeting, so you can just unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Diego Roballo from the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds the proposal to be insufficiently documented, which makes it hard to comment on. From what we can gather, the relationship between masonry and glass is awkward and inappropriate. The use of stucco on the facade might be acceptable, but it's not our preference. We recommend the use of brick instead, which matches the material context of the rest of the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. And the next sign up I have is the Big Apple Group. You should be receiving a request from me now. I see that you have rejoined as a panelist. You can go ahead. Please turn on your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon. My name is Edward Perez. I am the Senior Monitoring Director at the Big Apple Group, and I would like to speak in favor of this project with consideration for the protection of adjacent buildings. We recommend a monitoring program to reduce the likelihood of construction damages to the adjacent historic structures and to detect at an early stage the beginning of damage so that construction procedures could be changed, typically consisting of a pre-construction survey along with construction monitoring such as daily crack gauge readings, monitoring for building movement and high vibration. I understand that there's no underpinning on this project, but if you could, comment on the depth of excavation and how long those activities would take. It's important that you don't undermine the existing foundation walls at any time during the construction. And just to put that out there, the Big Apple Group would like to work with the developers to protect said adjacent structures. We can write a preliminary monitoring protocol in accordance with the Technical Policy and Procedures Notice 1088. If anybody is interested, I can be reached at 718-767-2900, or you could read more about it on vibrationmonitoring.com. Thank you. That is it.
Thank you. Okay, those are my signups. Let me just see if there are any additional hands raised. And I do not see any more additional hands raised of anyone wishing to speak, so I will hand it back over to Lisa Kersavage.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of additional testimony, we received Brooklyn Community Board 2 sent a letter recommending approval of the application.
Okay, and no other testimony, is that right?
No other testimony.
Okay. Any last questions from commissioners before we think of closing the hearing? No? All right. Could I ask Michael Devonshire to make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved, friend.
Okay, and Wellington, would you second that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to closing the hearing this time? All right, no, so the hearing is now closed. Let's start with Commissioner Holford Smith.
Sure. I think in general, this is a fairly modest request for an addition. It lines up with the existing adjacent neighbor, keeps the top floor intact. I think the only thing that I'm looking at that's odd to me is maybe because the proportions of the building are short, it makes the addition very, which is full width, look very wide and very glassy. And I would think that it would be much more appropriate if they could reduce the amount of glass on that second floor. I guess maybe that's the main floor, first floor. But they could work with staff to do that. I think otherwise I find it okay. And the stucco, I don't think it should be a stark white. I think it would be sort of a tan color. I think testimony also suggested brick, which would be acceptable as well. That's it for me.
Good, thank you. Michael Goldblum.
I'm actually fine with it as is, but I think that Ann's suggestions would make it better.
Okay, and going around now to the east side of our table, our virtual table, we'll have Michael Devonshire.
Thank you, Fred. I agree with Ann's comments as well. I feel very strongly that the stucco color should be darker. If I may, also, the Big Apple group, they testified twice today, and both of those testifying moments seem to be advertisements for their firm. Is there some way that, are we going to have to now start listening to consultants pitching their firms for 3 minutes every time we have a hearing?
Well, we're going to explore, we're going to speak to them. We'll also explore ways about stopping that behavior.
Okay, thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway.
Thank you, Commissioner Devonshire, for actually uttering that on the public record. Because
Yes.
I noted it too, and I'm glad that Mark Silverman is going to look into it. Thank you. Wellington, I guess we're coming around to you.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I'm glad that Commissioner Devonshire brought up that well-taken point, but I'm in agreement with the majority that the stucco should not be stark white, and I think Ann's suggestion will actually make it better.
And also to reduce the size of the windows on the second floor?
Well, maybe proportionally the size of the side, yeah, just to make it less glassy.
Yeah, okay. All right, now we'll go over to Commissioner, where are we? John, you're next.
I'm not surprised this time. So you can't teach an old dog. I agree with Ann and both of her comments completely.
Yeah, okay. And finally, Adi.
Yes, I can accept it as it's proposed, and I'm not, I don't find that the white is objectionable, but I would agree if others do with Ann's proposal to sort of like reduce some of the glazing, that would be acceptable to me.
All right, well, I'm in the same camp. I think reduction of the glazing, particularly on the second level, perhaps even squaring it up with the first, meaning a little bit more solid masonry on the two sides would help. I do think that the white would be jarring and calls way too much attention to itself back there. And it's not going to be white for very long anyway. So I would suggest some other kind of a toned down color, just so it doesn't call so much attention to itself. But it seems like we have finally, during this afternoon, a majority of us who agree. So could I ask John Gustafson to read that?
Okay. In the matter of LPC 22-02394, 253 Carlton Avenue in the Fort Greene Historic District, the application is to construct a rear yard addition I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Fort Greene Historic District. I recommend approval with some modification, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the proposed work will not be visible from a public thoroughfare, that the addition will not rise to the full height of the building, thereby helping to retain defining aspects of the building's original scale and massing, that the depth of the proposed addition will be consistent with the depth of other rear yard additions found within the central green space, and that the tiered massing of the addition featuring a protruding basement level will have a harmonious presence in this block, which features houses with a variety of massing types. That the white stucco cladding and large expanses of glazing will not be harmonious with the character and relatively small scale of the row house and adjoining rear facades, and will call undue attention to the addition. Therefore, I recommend that the cladding material at the rear facade of the addition be revised to brick or a darker stucco, and that the size of the openings at the main floor, I guess that's the parlor floor, should be reduced and by widening the outer piers.
Anne, would you second that?
I second it.
All right, now we'll go around. All in favor? Oh,
No, Fred, I'll call the roll. So Vice Chair Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 7 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Good. Well, thank you. Good luck with this. And I think that concludes our day. So thank you all again, as Sarah would say, to the public, but also to you. So we'll see you next time.
Happy Thanksgiving,
everyone.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Yeah.